433, I'd like to call the Community Development Committee to order. I can't continue, wait a minute. Okay, first thing is the invocation. I'm gonna have to ask Council Member Sacrum, would you be able to give us a short invocation or any way you want to do it?
Sure, I will say just a few words and then we'll take a moment of silence. I'll do it double. I just wanted to say, dear Lord or dear God, thanks for being with us during these trying times, particularly the past year and most noticeably the past month here in Charleston. Just want to give us the leadership and the wisdom to do the best job we can for the public. And with that, amen.
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 Amen. Okay, we have anyone, well, we have quite a few people from the public, but everyone that's, I think, from the public is on the agenda. Is that correct?
Gianna.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so everyone is from the public is on the agenda. So we can move right along to the minutes, approval of the minutes we have. Okay, November 12th, 2020, January 28th, 2021, and February 25th, 2021 will be deferred. We have some other things that they're trying to get together and getting that squared away. So I would ask for approval for the November 12th and January 28th minutes.
I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, I forgot we had also March 11th, 2021 and March 25th and March 25th.
I move for approval for all of them,
Thank
Chairman.
you very much. Okay.
Second.
Second, it was moving second. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes? No opposes, so we'll move right along. Okay, we go on to the new business. First is update and presentation for the rental assistant demonstration program, Charleston Housing Authority. Mr. Don Cameron, you up first.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to come before you. Last time I did was August 27th, and at the time we agreed to do this twice a year rather than once a year. And then in September, I got COVID, and that took care of twice a year. So this is kind of a 9-month update instead of a 6-month update. On the old projects that we talked about last August, let me quickly run through those. Kiowa Homes is the first renovation, which is preservation with substantial rehabilitation, is moving forward. With a little bit of luck, it'll close with HUD, with the bankers, with the tax credit investors, everybody, the first quarter of 2022. It's taken a little bit longer. We're learning a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly of trying to get all the pieces together, but that should happen. The second would be 1031 King Street. It is a small property behind the John Dot Library by Food Lion. It's 22 apartments. That's a little bit different. We're going to transfer it and the financial support for it. And we have all the capital money already in hand for do the rehabilitation. That will be escrowed and will be actually spent post-closing. And that should occur November or December of this year. And all the construction work would occur in the first 6 to 9 months of 2022. The third property is 275 Uchee Street, which was in the paper about 6-7 weeks ago, where we are demolishing those 12 units there in 2 buildings on that property with partners that we had advertised for. We will be constructing 85 units of affordable housing for low and moderate income people. 12 of the 85 will be the same unit mix as exists today. So those 12 units that are out there, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, the same type, will be as part of the 85 unit mix under a contract with HUD for 20 years, renewable for a second 20 years. And that should close mid to late 2022. We've received the developer's proposal of an agreement for the partnership. It is under review by our staff and the attorneys. We hope to have that finished by the end of June. If we can meet that timeline, then I think by the end of summer, we will have a good idea as to what next steps and what that timeline will look like, which I'll be able to then share with the committee. The last priority one item, property, is Meeting Street Manor, which is 201 units of public housing just north of our office here on Upper Meeting Street. We met with the architects last week. We walked the property. They will move forward on it. My guess is that the closing on that would be optimistically late 22, pessimistically the first quarter of 2023. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have and then go on to the next, which is priority number 2. So are there any questions on priority 1 properties?
Councilmember Sacrin, I think that's what it is.
Thank you, Chair. Just some quick questions. Don, I appreciate you coming and, we met about a month ago, I believe, and you reviewed some of these. I try to send out an update to some of my constituents on a monthly basis, and I have had questions about Kiowa. So can you just kind of like articulate in like one sentence the type of renovation that's going to happen at Kiowa? A lot of rumors floating around.
Right. Kiowa, if you're up on Upper Meeting Street at the Rutledge Cab Company, you looked over, you say, that's a pretty little property which fits in contextually to Wagner Terrace, the Craftsman style bungalows. But if you walk through the door, you go back about 30 years. So the renovation of those will be a gut rehab, roughly $150,000 per unit. They will go back to the studs on all of those, and some of them also require floor replacement. It'll be the most extensive renovation of any units we do in the RAD program.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Mayor?
Could you give that same thumbnail sketch of the renovations for the King Street properties? I don't remember hearing them being on the list before.
They were not. HUD has, and it's kind of like it's a dance, except we've got 3 or 4 suitors we're trying to dance to. One is FHA, one is the South Carolina Department of Housing and Housing Development Authority, and the other is HUD, along with a lot of other people who have their fingers in the pot. But one of the requirements was that we had to show activity in 2021. And because Kiowa looked like it was going to slide into 2022 and the 275 would not be ready till 2022, we kind of threw in 1031, which was a scattered site that we had intended to preserve anyway. And what it is, it's about $400,000 worth of renovation that will occur to those 22 apartments. For instance, all the roofs need to be replaced. Some kitchen modernization and some other work needs to be done. We have the money to do that. And what HUD is going to allow us to do is to close on the transaction, escrow all the funds that we would use from our capital account, and then do all of the renovations post-closing out of that special reserve account.
Gotcha. And what's the level of renovations there?
Probably at about $20,000 to $25,000 a unit.
I see.
They were constructed in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Chairman, I do have one other question.
I don't see anyone else yet. I don't see anyone else have their hands up yet.
Oh, Councilmember Waring.
Councilman Waring? I couldn't see you.
Now let the mayor finish, please.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you go ahead and finish.
So, Don, I know we've talked about trying to increase density, and for this question, I'd focus on the Meeting Street Manor properties. And I know you're aware that our Commission on Racial Conciliation and their housing subcommittee is recommending that the city change the zoning basically and increase the density for the general area between Hughie, Meeting, Morrison Drive, and maybe down to Lee Street or so. So I respectfully would ask that we hunker down again with you and our planning department and see if there's any opportunity to try to increase the density on that portion of the project, or however you call each piece of this.
Yes, sir. The way that it kind of stands right now is, and I've spoken with the board, but they've not officially acted, is Cooper River Courts is 216 apartments north and south of Sanders Clyde Elementary School, and it's kind of an L shape, 3 city blocks. The 3rd city block is immediately behind Taco Boy. We think that's a good candidate for repositioning, which is the HUD definition. And with the Morrison Yards project across the street, that it really makes sense that it could be redeveloped into a mixed income as well as a mixed use property. We just, rather than putting out all 3 blocks, which we think are 3 different solutions, that we put out 1 block at a time. If the board approves it, and I believe that they will, the first block they would put out would be the triangular block north of Sanders Clyde as a mixed use, mixed income property. The second would be the block south of Sanders Clyde, which has 87 families, which I think it lends itself more towards limited mixed use, but primarily mixed income. The third block being the block behind Taco Boy from America Street to Hanover Street. And I think that lends itself to really just residential mixed income. But on America Street, it could be higher in terms of the elevation and then step down as it moves into the neighborhood. So it's kind of like we've looked at some of those studies and the proposals by the planning department and Humanities Foundation. And it's kind of like we've come up with a halfway meeting of the mind, that it would not apply to Meeting Street Manor, which is the first public housing built in South Carolina back in 37 and 38 by the Works Progress Administration. But the Cooper River Courts definitely lends itself to that repositioning. But again, that's still a decision to come back before the board.
All right.
Councilman Waring?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cameron, I appreciate we trying to get together, but I know we will in person. I guess my question is along the lines similar to the mayor's. I think that's where the mayor was headed. Higher density. I think it may have been 6 or 7 years ago. I'm sure I can dig up the article. It would have been when Mayor Raleigh was mayor. He had an article in the Chronicle about affordable housing on the peninsula, and I said back then that the real affordable housing on the peninsula would be in the sky above public housing. Because when you look at, for example, Kiowa Homes, I think that's around 9 acres or maybe a little bit better than 9 acres. And you look at Gatson Green, I think is 11, less than 12 acres, I don't know, somewhere around 11 acres. Hypothetically, if those, and I know when they're not, but hypothetically, if those properties, obviously the tract that you made mention, Meeting Street Manor, I don't know what the acreage is there, but certainly it's a large tract. If those properties were vacant today, what would be the number of units we would go back on top of those units? In particular, what would the private sector do? I think what you're doing is just great. But, there's always that proverbial but. How can we get more units? And what does it take? What kind of collaboration does it take? I know you're out there yourself. I don't know what the city can do from a standpoint of helping to get more units. I don't know how we can think out of the box financially while interest rates are low to acquire additional bonding capacity. I know you have your limitations. I don't know what we can do as a city, but I can tell you what, I'm certainly willing to think out of the box to see what we can do. In particular with, obviously the administration that we have. I don't know how long they're going to be there, but try to maximize our abilities to get funding to create affordable housing, mixed use housing, commercial, mixed in with, MU type uses. So, if we were to, when you look at the number of units that would be increased, I mean, are we trading one affordable unit to get two affordable units, or trading one affordable unit to get three affordable units? On average, I mean, with the ones that you're contemplating doing now, what is the increase in the number of affordable housing units if it goes through the way you hopefully anticipate?
There's really two pieces to the answer. And the first is when our board authorized us to go forward with the RAD program and our application to HUD to re-engineer our public housing portfolio with 1,407 units, is the line in the sand that the board approved was, number one, when we were all said and done, all finished, there'd still be 1,407 families fully supported by HUD, except under these long-term contracts in the city of Charleston, in actual shelters, not vouchers that come and go and are affected by market forces. Second, we wouldn't contribute to gentrification, which again, if we gave people a voucher today, that'd be really swell, except they couldn't live in the city of Charleston. They'd have to go live someplace else because the vouchers don't pay enough. So looking at that, the first commitment that the board made was to Kiowa, Main Street Manor, and Robert Mills as preservation deals with substantial rehab. The second iteration was to look at 275 UG Street as a small site where the whole neighborhood changed dramatically around it with the apartments that have all been built. Would be a good opportunity to do this repositioning to show the community what could be in reimagining those little 12 units, 2 buildings on that site. So just taking that for a second as an example of possibly, Mr. Waring, what could happen, we're going to go from 12 units for very low income people to 85 units for low and moderate income people. Incorporating in that 85 is 12 for very low income people. The other 73 will be for people at 50% AMI, 60% AMI, and then, if you will, a sub-market moderate income people. Because the housing authority under law in the state, and we'll be a partner in that deal, can only deal with the population up to 150% of AMI, which is very generous. I mean, that isn't very poor people, but it is a number of working low income families who are starting out, who can't pay $2,000 a month for rent to live downtown, but could afford $1,600 or $1,700 or $1,800 a month rent. So that's what we hope to get out of UG Street.
I commend you on that. I read that in the paper and I thought that was outstanding.
So to take that forward a second to Cooper River Courts, we have 216 families there. I think that you could reasonably end up with 450, 500 families on those 3 city blocks. Now, the question that comes in there is, should those 216 families number go back into that mix on the 3 blocks? And for instance, sociologically, just taking the block south of Sanders Clyde, it's got 87 families in it. Maybe redesigned, repositioned with a private partner, maybe it should be 250 units. I'm just picking numbers out of the hat.
Sure.
Well, I don't think it'd be a good idea to put 87 extremely low income people back in that same block. Maybe it should be 40 is a good mix sociologically, but we've got to then find land or existing structures for the other 47 here on the peninsula. And that goes to your question about how can the city help? I think the city could help either through land or acquisition with substantial rehab of small apartment complexes, or helping to finance where did the other 47 families go on the peninsula? Because our commitment is we have to protect those 47 others before we can sign on the dotted line.
Mhm.
But I think that reasonably, the repositioning and all the other properties we own are up for, quote, consideration for repositioning, could generate 600 to 800 additional affordable housing units. And that's, I think, a conservative estimate.
And when you say affordable housing, income ranges, can you fit that in there?
All from the very low income replacement units up to 150% of AMI. Like Grace Homes. Grace Homes is 62 units, of which 35 are for very low income people. The other 27 are for working poor people, working low income, low and moderate income people, which goes up to 150% of AMI. I mean, that part of that is at the end of the day, we've got to have that mix. It can't be all of one income strata.
All right. So if you were to change hats, I know it's hard because you've had that same hat for a long time, but what should be the action steps for us as city stakeholders to identify some sites where some additional housing can go for those 47 families that you just alluded?
Right. I mean, that would greatly facilitate us moving forward. I mean, we're already committed that we're not going to finish one deal and one renovation before we start number 2 and number 3 and number 4. That a lot of these will go parallel, but when we get down to Cooper River Courts and then the assets we own after that, we're really going to be in a crunch with this relocation issue. And again, giving somebody a voucher, which is an option that HUD has, isn't feasible here in the city of Charleston because there's no place for them to go in the city on the private economy that will take Section 8 at the Section 8 rentals. And for people to have to leave their city is not an acceptable solution.
And Don, this is Dudley. And we're at the 40 in order to maintain a balance so that the project would not tip.
Yes, that too, on the business side,
Yes.
the rents that HUD will pay are not market rents. So they're locked into, part of the complication of RAD is HUD does not contribute one more penny to supporting the population than they did before you did RAD. So the amount of rent that they will pay to support those families, like at UG Street, is the amount of operating subsidy we get annually and the amount of capital funds we get annually per family. So the rental for those 12 very low income families in that 85 would be on the extremely low area, low realm. And again, as Mr. Gregory pointed out, you still got to make it work at the end of the day financially for your partners. And that's another reason for the mix.
Let me ask another question. Dealing with some of the other public housing communities. Let's take Gadsden Green community for instance. If we were able to do a RAD on Gadsden Green what, and our zoning, our height for zoning changes so that we can get more units. How many, I know we still have to do 1-for-1 replacement of public housing units, but how many other, not just affordable housing, but also market rate housing that we could get in there in order to subsidize the affordable rents that would be needed to protect certain folks that are at an income, let's say 100, even 150, okay, income level. Can we, and I'm just trying to think outside of the box, you know, given the development that's going on in that community with West Edge, could we partner with a West Edge Foundation and in addition to public, city, private, and develop 2,000 or 3,000 units back there, change the height so that we can get to it, protect the 1-for-1 replacement, and with that kind of concentration, we would be able to keep the number of existing units on site with the redevelopment. Is that something that we could do?
Yes.
And I think that's the point that Keith was getting to. I mean, how do we get, can we pick a public housing community where we could maximize, when I say maximize, I'm talking about 2,000 or 3,000 units, affordable market rate, low income, a totally mixed income community. But the upper will take care of the subsidy for the affordability. Even have some condos, home ownership. I mean, totally revamp the community, like we did with some of the Hope Sixes, as you're aware of.
Right. I mean, I think the basic answer is yes. I mean, Gaston Green and Gaston Green Extension is 3 city blocks. 264 families live there. I would guess that it is, the 2 properties are a good candidate for repositioning. I think that how it was repositioned would be much different than, say, UG Street, because to get the market rate in there, literally real estate market, and to get the home ownership, whether it's in a condo form or not, would take a different structure. But I think it's all doable. I think the questions that arise on it are, would it be really good to put 264 low-income people back in there sociologically to get that mix, so that then you'd have to drive the numbers up and get, as you said, Mr. Gregory, 1,000 or 2,000 units, and would it be a good living environment? The other part is that the people we house, if they're with us for 5 years, then they're with us for 15. That's not a typical apartment renter. Typical apartment person is, they're living there, they like it, it's convenient to work, schools, whatever. But as soon as their income gets better, job opportunities, whatever, they move. The people we serve do not move. So the issue of livability and the quality of life is just of paramount importance to us. But the basic answer is, it's all doable.
Okay, because I think it's been done in other places, as long as we don't, what is that tipping point, 40% or something like that, or 30%?
Well, 25 to 30, anything you get above 30, I think, you know,
Yes.
really kind of in an iffy
Yes.
area.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's the kind of a bold vision that I see that we should be considering to really try to beef up our affordability inventory, at the same time creating wealth creation opportunities, and especially if we're talking Gadsden Green community, they'll be right in the heart of a knowledge-based industry. I'm just saying that there's just so many opportunities if we can sort of meld that development and totally redeveloping the Gadsden Green community at the same time and create literally, I mean, literally thousands of units back there.
Right.
Now, I know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you selected the projects for RAD, you did not select the worst of these, right? And
Well,
that's
our application to HUD and HUD's acceptance is the entire portfolio. No public housing property is excluded. Priority-wise, before we tackle the elephant in the room, Gadsden Green on the west side, it's our belief we have to have a track record. It's our belief we've got to have community support, and we've got to be able to show and prove to the community that we do it sensitively, that relocation is handled humanely, that we've looked out for the interest of the residents, that looking forward, that we really have not just increased numbers, but had good quality of life. Again, going back to UG Street, we had 4 proposals from partners to work with us on that. The one we picked and the design that was in the newspaper that Eddie Bello came up with is the only one of the 4 that wasn't a box to warehouse people in. That isn't the Charleston Housing Authority. It isn't the city of Charleston. And I think that's shown by our scattered sites, by Williams Terrace, by the Grace Homes, that, you know, quality of life today, tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that is an important value that we look at. So everything is on the table. We've got to try to keep that balance on all those issues.
just as a follow-up.
Councilmember Smith.
What happened? We're gonna let Mr. Cameron answer one more question, then we'll bring Mr. Cameron back and just have him here that we can, you can all go through this questions and answer period to see what else we can do. Because we have, excuse
Mr.
me.
Chairman?
Yes,
Yeah, could I just make that suggestion? And listening to all of this, you know, really innovative and strategic thinking, I was going to ask you and the mayor to gain Mr. Cameron's cooperation along with some of his board members. Could we create like a very dynamic, you know, working group that goes forward from right now? We understand that, you know, your tier 1 properties are basically, you know, leaving the station, Mr. Cameron, and I don't think any of us want to miss out on the highest and best for all of your goals, values, and criteria that you've reminded us of today. But at the same time, we know that we've got a lot of driving forces from our work with the Housing and Mobility Committee on the Commission for Equity. We've got, I mean, just looking at the Zoom screen right now, we have people on this meeting, you know, that should be part of a wider, more cohesive, you know, think tank about this, because we will need private partners. Of course, you need private partners, and we do need city resources. And I want to throw out, why can't the city like create some sort of, you know, fund that would help subsidize vouchers if that becomes one of the relocation strategies? There's just so many things. So that's what I would hope, that we could create a working group and get going now and not hold you back to any big extent, but yet make sure that we're not leaving anything, you know, undone or unsaid.
Hey, Carol, if I might, if Mr. Chairman, if I might suggest for Councilmember Jackson's recommendation, I really think that perhaps expanding the subcommittee on housing and mobility would be the place for us to do that instead of creating another committee, and even have Mr. Cameron visit that committee again. And as chairmen, you, myself, and Keith, you know, we can also, and anyone else, be a part of that discussion in that committee. I just think I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
I mean, I think that's great as a follow-on. I think we've probably worn Chairman Doran out to some extent, but yeah, I mean, certainly the cohesiveness of that subcommittee on behalf of the city and our regional interests, certainly that would be the core of thinking that's already underway.
Okay, what we'll do, we'll get all that together, and then we'll have the committee check with the committee and check with Mr. Cameron and try to have all that taken care of, and so we can meet and we can try to iron this out and try to get some cohesive plan in place before time's going, because time is moving on so far as that's concerned, because they have to get some things done too. So we're gonna have to expedite this, if you may. So we'll work on that very seriously. Okay. I think she got all the minutes there that we'll have to contact and get that together, Ms. Johnson.
Yes, sir. I'll
Okay.
confer with Mr. Cameron to determine who from his board, unless all of his board wants to do it, and then get back, follow up with Councilmember Gregory, and I think Councilmember Saccharin are leading that effort, but I'll circle back appropriately with
All right.
the follow-up.
Thank you much. So right now we'll move on to, we have another presentation by Charleston Redevelopment Corporation, Mr. F.A. Johnson.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Don,
We'll get back with you later.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Johnson, you up?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Development Committee, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you on behalf of Eli Polikoff, the chairman of the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation, and our entire board. We certainly welcome the opportunity to come before you and give you a short briefing. Certainly, we have several of our board members here on the line with us, Councilwoman Jackson, Mr. Singleton, Ms. Gianna Shaw Johnson, as well, representing the organization. Really would like to, I'm not sure if the administrator has the ability or has given me the ability to share a brief PowerPoint as I talk. I'd like to be able to do that if I could.
Yes, you
okay,
do.
thank you. All right, thank you. And so I would just share this briefly with you and walk through it, but I would just remind the committee that and I'll just say CRC, but the CRC has fiscal responsibility or administrative agency for two contracts with the city, one of which provides that we will annually report on the status of those funds. And then the CRC does an annual briefing and meeting. And so I can use that as the context for walking through that. Hopefully you have in front of you just an opening slide, but I'll try and move through this quickly just to really get to the core issues if we could. Certainly the board, I believe that all of you all are familiar with the composition and makeup of our board, so I want to spend our time really discussing some of the activities and projects. We have started with a number of scattered site initiatives, 23, 21, 30 Garrett, which we are actually preparing for a closing the 1st of June with a home buyer, and we have the lot next door at 2319, which is also moving forward under construction. Certainly happy with that and what's happening over at Battery and Fifth Avenue from a scattered site perspective. Continue to look at scattered site from a home ownership basis, certainly as part of that, but I wanted to zero in a little bit here and talk to you a little bit about the contracts that we're administering. The settlement funds being the first one that I'll just touch on briefly. The $10 million from the LDC settlement, we are roughly halfway through in terms of committing those funds. having committed approximately 4.4 million. We're getting ready to close on 1.3 million to go out to support 30 units of affordable housing, but certainly wanted to report that on average, we're leaving about $36,000 a unit in either loan subsidy or participation as a part of that. Our charge that the board has adopted was of that 9 million to spend or try and target a third of that as subsidy to support affordable housing projects, a third of that to lend to other developers, proponents of affordable housing, and then a third of that to use to build the CRC's portfolio. And so the activities so far reflect somewhat of that balance and mix of everything from the Sea Island apartments, which we purchased at the end of 2019. We're currently negotiating for another apartment complex potentially to acquire. But then we have also serving as a lender to nonprofits like Homes of Hope, as well as for-profits that are carrying out affordable housing. I will just respectfully remind the board that the committee that when that contract went through Ways and Means, the administrative portion of that, the $400,000 was reduced to $133,000. So at some point, I think the CRC might want to come back and re-engage in a more formal way about the balance of the administrative funds. So I just want to plant that seed for future conversations. And then the 8.3 million that we were able to put on the street in support of affordable housing funds in support of city bond funded projects, that those are going well. We have, and just to use round numbers, 3 that moving forward, 3 that continue through pre-development. And certainly if you have specific questions on any one of those, we can certainly get into the more details on that, but just wanted to let you know that those are in fact moving forward. And then you have some of the summaries there below in terms of some of the home ownership activities that I've sort of touched on already. I will just point out briefly that in terms of being creative, we're working with Historic Charleston to look at leveraging some of their dollars, as well as committing a matching money of 100,000 of the CRC dollars and securing grant funds to do some creative loan repair funds. So as we're looking at how do we leverage those resources that we were provided. So that's another component that may not have come to your attention. The rest of that, I don't necessarily want to go through the individual slides, but I just wanted to, again, come and just be with you, because I think it's important that as a founding member, that the city having a permanent seat on the board, that it's our obligation to come to you at least once a year and give you an update of what's happening from the Redevelopment Corporation perspective, but also as our contracts provide for the funds that we're administering, that until those funds are gone, we are contractually obligated to come before you and give you an update on the expenditure of those funds. I will say this, that going back to the settlement funds, while I indicated that roughly half of those funds being committed right now, the current conversation in terms of potential acquisition, we'd end up allocating about another 1.5 million. So that those dollars are going fast, and that would really leave us with close to or less than $2 million of the settlement funds left to be put on the street in some form or fashion. With that, I think those are the real highlights. Like I said, we get into as much detail as the committee would care to, but I just want to paint some broad strokes and again, engage with you all personally, so that as you have questions, you have an opportunity. I think I see Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, FA, if I may call you so. If you would kindly send that slide deck or presentation out for our distribution to look at further, that would be great. But I just wanted to commend you and thank you, because where the CRC has come in just the last few years has been pretty remarkable, in my opinion. And thanks to your leadership, and of course to Gianna's, but to your whole board, Mr. Polyakov and the other board members. I mean, y'all really have been started up from scratch just a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and lots of really good things have happened. Of course, it helps to have some money, doesn't it? That makes a huge difference. But Anyway, I just want to extend to you my thanks and congratulations, and keep it up.
Thank you, sir, Mayor.
Councilwoman Jackson?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to follow the mayor and you know, I do have a CRC Board of Directors seat. So when it comes to spending money on their behalf, I do have a conflict of interest. But in terms of being a cheerleader, I think I can go both ways. And I do want to agree with the mayor that, you know, CRC, yes, it greatly helps to have money. There's no question about it. But it also helps to have the kind of competent leadership that we now have that allows us to provide underwriting services for the city on your bond funds, and a variety of other, you know, construction management and expertise that you'd have to pay for if you wanted to do the kind of affordable housing that we're doing with, you know, permanent land trust ownership and things like that. So my grandmother loved to say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I think that we are eating the pudding that that the CRC has been cooking for us. So I do feel like we need to revisit, you know, making good on the original budget that was on the council's desk when CRC was essentially sponsored and created. We were to be, if we had the UDAG funds, which we do now, the city was supposed to be contributing the first round of operating money so that CRC would be able to hit the ground running. And that didn't happen. So we hit that ground running anyway. And I do feel like maybe we deserve a second chance at that. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Councilmember Waring?
It's more of a, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's more of a observation. Great job on everybody's behalf. I agree with the chorus. But I think, you know, one of the things in getting the 501c3 active again, because it went dormant some years ago, was I don't think we are taking advantage of the full abilities, if you will, of a 501c3. Maybe we need to get with a tax attorney and get some consulting on the different ways people can contribute to a 501c3. For example, most foundations, and particularly colleges and universities, when I know we don't have a development officer, but when a development officer calls on a grateful alumnus or a grateful patient in the case of medical university, they've probably got 15 to 18 different ways that grateful patient or that alumnus can give to, in this case, Health Science Foundation, or in the case of Carolina, University of South Carolina. Those same tax deductions are eligible through this 501c3 that we have. So if I'm a person who I'm getting on in age, I am, but I'm not 80 or 90 years old or something like that. But if I had a dormant piece of land that I didn't do anything with, and I'd like that to be contributed to the 501c3 to be used for affordable housing, I don't think we have the documentation to do that right now. I think there should be a form or a booklet that I would that people can say, you got a piece of land that you want to contribute. Here's the form. Fill this out, and we're going to give you get it appraised, give you a charitable deduction for it, and then obviously we would mitigate our land costs. If somebody has an annuity and they don't have a beneficiary because all the people, you know, they're not married, they don't have any kids, and all the people have died off, maybe they want to name the this 501c3 as a beneficiary. I don't think we're positioned to do that. And I think the only reason we're not positioned to do that is because you're right, we did hit the ground running. And I think, you know, there's some allies out there, and I don't know whether Charlton, what's our attorney, the bond attorney, tax attorney, Charlton, help me out. Who? Charlton, what's his last name?
Assessor.
Assessor.
Or there are tax attorneys out there that can put together a dozen different ways people can contribute into this 501c3 to build its assets in addition to a lot of the things the city has done. And obviously the settlement is a one-off. So we don't think there are any more settlements out there that's going to be coming through like that anytime soon anyway. But I think we're missing an opportunity by not doing that. So I think we should, and even if we have to pay the attorney to do it, it will come back, and I think tenfold in different ways. Because see, people, as a rule, are not going to contribute to government, because government has a reputation of not spending money efficiently. But they'll give money to a foundation. They'll give money to a 501c3. So I don't know that they're going to contribute a piece of land to the city of Charleston, but they may do it to this 501c3. So anyway, I think that's an opportunity that I think can be expanded upon greatly.
Any other questions? All right, we thank you much, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Presentation, very informative and very good. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you,
we'll
sir.
move right on along to the presentation of Homeless to Hope Center. Ms. Johnson?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. In fact, this presentation is almost coming too late, but it's never too late because we are not far enough along. We wanted to present this to you prior to presenting the land acquisition opportunity, but we certainly thank you for your support of that. It was presented to real estate and council to acquire Cunnington Avenue. So now we have that under contract. 3, 5, 7, and 9 Cunnington Avenue would in fact be the location of the future Homeless to Hope Center, what we all now know as the Navigation Center. And so that provides a plethora of services for those persons who are homeless and are at risk of homelessness. Many of you know that the Mayor's Commission on Homelessness and Affordable Housing have been engaged in the process of helping that community of our people here in the city of Charleston. And in fact, we received a sizable donation approximately 1 year ago of $695,000 to help towards building that Homeless to Hope Center. We also, the Mayor's Commission is also engaged with the Winkler Group to help raise matching funds or additional capital along with that. But of course, we all know that the acquisition and the construction of affordable housing is quite costly. And part of what we put in your packet this afternoon is what we are referring to as a cooperation agreement. It is in draft form, but it is a conversation that came out of my conversations with partners in the community, advising them, one, that the city was looking for land, and two, that the city wanted to build not only a center to house the now Navigation Center, but to also complement that with additional affordable rental housing on that same property. One of the key reasons we have to make sure we have permanent affordable housing is that the funding we use to acquire that land requires us to do that. So that's one reason. And certainly there's a need in our community for affordable rental housing as well as for sale housing. And so I wanted you to be aware of those efforts. And I wanted to also give Castell Singleton an opportunity to speak to this cooperation agreement that he presented a little while ago, so that you could have a sense of some of what's out there. Of course, this is draft, and anything we do would come back to you in the form of appropriate approvals. But this is one such effort to help bring about the types of money that we will need to help facilitate both the construction of the affordable housing, more specifically on this land. Cass, I'll turn it over to you.
I think you're on mute.
Cass, you're on
You're
mute.
still muted, Cass. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor, committee members, Ms. Johnson. I want to try to share my screen here right quickly. Let's see if I can do this. Give me just a second. Okay, y'all got it up in front of you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
So as you all know, Palmetto Community Action Partnership a part of what we do in terms of trying to lift people out of poverty is provide affordable housing. And we've been great partners with the city in that effort. And this is a great opportunity for us to look at an additional opportunity to do just that. And so the vision is to create housing to a person transitioning out of homelessness, permanent affordable housing, rental units, as well as provide some social services to go with it, which is some of what we do, but not totally. So the Homeless to Hope Collaborative would involve a number of partners, including Affordable Housing LLC, us, and the Navigation Center, and pastors, and perhaps some other partners as we move forward. And this would be a public-private partnership. The collaborative would jointly plan and develop the site for affordable housing. And so in concept, we're looking at approximately 50 rental units with about 7,000 square feet on the bottom floor for the Navigation Center and any supportive services that would be provided there. And then at least 80% of those units would be affordable based at various levels of the AMI. So we would need to, of course, put together a cooperation agreement. And at this point, what we're proposing is that the city would control 51%, they'd be a 51% partner, and the other players would be at 49% partners. And of course, we would have to find additional subsidies through tax credits and the like. And so we'll have to structure the transaction later to once we figure out what it is we're going to do and have collaboration with our partners in this to make sure that all of the goals and objectives are met. And of course, we plan to have 40% minority owned participation in the project. And so in conclusion, the goal is just to create some additional affordable housing on the city, which is really needed for persons transitioning out of homelessness. And so that will help to alleviate some of the problems that we have in the city. And we'll be able to provide some supportive type services that also helps. And this will be a public-private partnership. So we are excited about the opportunity to be engaged again with the city on this project. And at this point, just asking for your support conceptually. We know that there'll be questions as we move forward, but some of it we won't know until we get the opportunity to move forward. And so we're just excited about being able to present before you today. And thank you for your time. And I'll answer any questions if there's any I can answer at this point.
Anyone have any questions, Mr. Singleton?
I do. Well, it's actually, I think maybe Ms. Johnson, but is this property located in a TIF? You're on mute.
I can respond to that. It's in
ahead, Mayor.
It's in the, I call it the Magnolia TIF. It's that Upper Peninsula TIF.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Cass, can you take that slide down for us,
Yes.
please, so we can see everyone?
Yeah.
Any other questions? I can't see any hands if they're raising. Councilman Jackson?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I feel like I'm spending the whole meeting here thanking people. Thank you, Cass, for coming forward with this proposal. I think it's more than worthy of further development. And now that we have a property under contract that could work for a facility like this, I'm personally very excited that we could provide a long-term permanent home for the Homeless to Hope Center, Navigation Center, if you will, the name that's been used for the last couple of years, because it's clear to me that we as a city will need to continue to provide a place where wraparound services for those needing them can be available. 180 Place is great. They're terrific. I love them, but they kind of focus on a certain clientele and a certain population out there. And the city needs to maintain its flexibility long-term and being able to help our citizens in need. And to add housing on top of that to boot, I don't know. I think it makes all in the sense in the world. So I applaud y'all for bringing this forward. We need to work on it, to refine it some more, develop it some more, but I think it's a great idea.
Mr. I think there should be a button at the bottom of the screen that says to stop the screen share.
Yeah.
Yes, I see it.
Usually green in color.
Yes, that's for me.
For Castell Singleton, Mr. Singleton, to get the screen cleared. So.
Well, y'all, I apologize for my lack of technology here. Okay.
Okay.
We forgive you this time, Cass.
Councilman Jackson.
I'm following along with the mayor again. I just agree. I'm really praying that this land, is developable. I know we've got some hurdles to figure out during due diligence about some things, but my first entree into nonprofit housing was through helping my community set up what was called then I didn't even think it was called the hypothermia shelters yet. It was a temporary shelter that our community only allowed to operate in the winter months. And we had to literally bus residents in and out so that they wouldn't be noticed by people in my community. I'm not very proud of that. But over the 15 years that I was part of that group, we went from the winter shelter only to transitional to housing first models. So everything that you all are trying to do in a one-stop location, I think is the way that communities have been supporting these needs for the last 10, 20 years. And I say bravo, and I really do hope that the property works out for us. Thanks.
Councilman Waring or Councilman Greg, you have anything to say on this one?
I think it's a great idea. So, I'm supportive just like everybody else.
Okay. All right. We'll move right along.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yeah.
I'll also report to the city committee. We have done the phase 1, and right now the phase 1 is clear, and we are contracting with the gentleman. He's charging minimal money, Mr. Grant Mishu, to make sure that there are no graves on the site.
All right.
And the next test is the geotech, but the phase 1 came back yesterday, and so there are no recognized environmental conditions of any sort. One of the more difficult aspects of it, but we're looking at remedies now that I've been talking to Matt Fountain and his team about, is making sure the stormwater is there. And then we know we have low water pressure on the site that Charleston Water Systems is aware of and will work with us and is working with us through that issue.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll add to that. I'll add to that report that I saw Grant Mishu today with the Gullah Society. He's already, he's got so much research already done. He says there's no known cemetery or graves on this site. So we're heading in the right direction.
Good. That's good. That's good to hear. Okay, we move right along. Ms. Johnson, you up next again. Laurel Island, Affordable Workforce Housing.
Yes, sir. I included for the City Committee of City Council a memo regarding the Laurel Island development. As you all know, there is a level of affordable housing slated to be constructed in this development. The cost for the first 200 of those units is $12 million. That's probably, when we look at a per unit subsidy cost, because the overall cost is about $41.4 million. There was a request that came to the city to help support the cost to build those, the first 200 units, which is where the $41 million came in. And naturally, and you all know because you are aware of the budget, we don't have $12 million sitting around. And so what I basically wanted to apprise the CD Committee of City Council of is that that request had come to us as part of the Laurel Island development and those folks that are involved with that. So we began looking at options and opportunities that could be pursued to ensure that that funding became a reality. And even with what I have disclosed and illustrated to you in the memorandum, we still didn't come up with 12 million, but we approximately $6 million of different funding sources could be made available in order to facilitate the development of the affordable housing. I would step back for a moment because I'm trying to go fast because I know we're short on time. The money that would be provided to the developers for these units or for this $12 million would be in the form of a loan. They have indicated, and I think I also included what they have submitted to me initially, is an opportunity to repay the funds that are then lent for the purposes that we are discussing here. We want to find a way certainly to support this because of the need for affordable and workforce housing in our community. And so I wanted to make certain, and I've talked to the mayor about it, of course, and internal staff to find a way to support this. But more importantly, it's always encouraging for us when we can get money coming back and recycled back to our affordable housing coffers. And as we think through and think about the amount of subsidy and the amount of investment we make in housing now, oftentimes we are investing more than $60,000 per unit. So I believe that it could be a good investment. All of the options that I have presented to the City Committee of City Council in some cases have to be explored a little bit further. In many cases, they are funding sources that we have on hand right now. It would be a matter of making sure that we submit that separate approval to you all to ensure that we're following the appropriate compliance. But that is the challenge that is before us, to assist with finding funding to help develop those housing units at the Laurel Island development. I wanted to present this so that if CD Committee of City Council had any other ideas or thoughts, additional feedback, then we were considering all of our options as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Mayor, any questions? Anybody have any questions?
No questions. I just think that the fact that this request is just for a loan that would end up revolving back to us, as opposed to, I'm not saying any of the grants that we did for, have been doing for some of these affordable developments were not good decisions. They were good decisions, but it makes this one look even better because you get the money back. You know, it's like the ones we've done for Archer School and all are not revolving loan fund loans. They're actually basically grants. So anyway, when you look at it that way, it seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Ms. Johnson, I know you all keep working on it and you come back to us when we have something very close to it, if you may, with the money.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They've communicated, Robert and his team have communicated that the funds would not be needed until towards the end of 2022. Okay. We're asking for some more data on, you know, how the funding will revolve back to us and those sorts of things. And so once we have more information, we will naturally bring that to Ways and Means and City Council for your approval. But we believe that the housing is important enough where if we can find those dollars and we have some available, then we would like to support it with the appropriate support from council.
We'll keep looking.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move right along. We have one more, it's an update on Laurel Island Development Agreement and Infrastructure agreement. That's Chip Queenie. Is you on there, Chip?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
On you.
All right, I'll give an update on this. Staff has been working on this, as has the developer, for a few months now. Everybody, pretty much every department head and several division heads have touched upon it. Gianna just sort of went over the workforce housing component, or a portion of the workforce housing component. Jeremy Cook, who's on the line, and I'll let him answer any questions after I finish, but is handling the what's called the Public Infrastructure Improvements Agreement, which will be an exhibit and part of the development agreement. That will basically control how a portion of the TIF funds are spent, the portion generated from Laurel Island. Essentially right now, I think the city has it split up into three, what we call buckets of the Morrison Drive TIF, the Laurel Island portion, the increment from Laurel Island, the increment from Morrison Yard, and then the sort of third catch-all bucket. And we're working on agreements with both the Morrison Yard owners and the Laurel Island developer, dealing with their requested uses for TIF funds, which will also in part address our own use of TIF funds. That'll be a big component of it, which again is why we have everybody involved in it. Just to give you a reminder for Laurel Island, the current PUD allows up to 7,750 dwelling units. There's required minimums of both office space and retail space. Within the development, there's required open space, and they go above the minimum requirements for open space. The development agreement, unlike the PUD, is more of a vested rights ordinance, in addition to the aspect that controls spending of TIF funds, called the Public Infrastructure Agreement. People refer to that as a PI agreement, Public Infrastructure Improvements, PII agreement. But the development agreement, the main intent of a development agreement is to lock in the zoning applicable to the property, the laws applicable to the property, so that they can't change for a certain period of time. We talked, I think, a month, maybe 2 months ago, about the acreage thresholds under state law. If you have 24 or more acres of highland, you can enter into a 5-year vested right development agreement. If you get over 250 acres, you get to a 10-year vested right development agreement. Because of the way state law sets up vested rights in general, it usually isn't. You don't want to spend too much time or money dealing with a 5-year development agreement, because you already have a 2-year vested right once you get a site plan approved, and you can get up to 5 renewals of that. So it's sort of the 10 years is really the least you want to go. We had discussed last time using portions of the Dill Tract and Morris Island to get to that 250 acres. I believe there's roughly 160 acres within the Laurel Island development itself. Last time this committee discussed utilizing the West Ashley bike path, which is owned by the city, as a possible substitute. The current iteration of the agreement would use Morris Island, which incidentally was donated to a land trust and eventually given to the city. But the donation to land trust was by an entity related to the entity that's developing Laurel Island. So that's sort of the tie-in there. There will be no development on Morris Island under the development agreement. The other property that would be utilized is the bikeway, which is somewhere around 38 acres. In order to sort of create a nexus between that development or that bikeway and the Laurel Island development, the developer is going to agree to contribute a sum of money to be utilized, I think, for the turtle and duck pond It's been a few years since I've lived in lived on west of the Ashley, I'll put it like that. But so I'm not quite familiar with that portion of the bike path, but the developer has agreed to include that in the development agreement. We've tied up a number of issues, or we're in the process of it. One is that the fire department had another number of concerns, including the location of a new fire station, which is going to be needed in that area. It would be Fire Station 4. We're working out the donation of either the land or space kind of underneath an existing building for use as a fire station that would be provided to the city under the development agreement. The Parks Department had expressed concerns about the ability to utilize open space for recreational programs. We're working on the timing aspect of that, but the developer has at least agreed in principle that the city could control the use of those open space areas, including the ball fields that would be developed on the property. The developer would still be building and constructing all the open space, active open space areas. There'd be a crabbing dock, a pier, a dog park, an interpretive center related to the historical use of the property. I say center, an interpretive trail and park, as well as the ball fields that you may be familiar with from when we discussed last time. The proposed sort of phasing of the development, if I can share my screen real quick, I'm going to just pull up a GIS map of the property, is really sort of dictated by access. So the initial phase would increase access across Romney Street to the island. So most of phase one would be developed in this area. That once you reach a certain trigger, and that's touched on in the PUD, the access from Blow Street would need to be built. So most of the development will occur from the south of the island northwards. And then the third access point would be up to, I believe it's Brigade Street, and back this way. And I think the major ask on the TIF monies is for transportation improvements. That is something that we're still working out with Keith, Benjamin, and the developer. And that's understandable because it's going to you're going to need a lot of transportation investment in order to get anything built on the island, private or public. But when you consider the amount of workforce housing, they promised 10% permanent workforce housing. So at any given time in the next 5 years, in the next 100 years, 10% of all housing dwelling units on the island will be affordable dwelling units. In addition, from the time you pull a CO on any given dwelling unit or a group of dwelling units, 10% of those would be affordable for a period of 10 years. So transportation, that's not going to happen without transportation improvements. And I think that's really the lion's share of the ask for the use of TIF funds. The developer has also proposed improvements in the area to intersections off island that will both contribute to development on the island and contribute to the neighborhood adjacent to the island. One of them being helping with the continued improvement of Singleton Park. Others being things like sidewalks and streetscapes in the area. The park aspect, again, I think we're just working on timing, workforce housing. We've got the MOU that we're discussing. And the public infrastructure agreement, I think, is a matter of traffic and transportation, and also addressing the 3 buckets I spoke about, especially with respect to the Morrison Yard project that's already ongoing. I think those are the major aspects. I'm happy to discuss anything in detail if anyone has any questions. It's an odd situation in the city because we don't this is not a huge, stormwater is very important, but this is not a huge aspect. It's not a huge impact on other properties off island. So it's interesting to be sort of working with everything else and stormwater being not at the absolute forefront of what's going on.
One question, Chip. Do you think it's feasible that this can come to with the development agreement and the infrastructure agreement could come to council in June? Will you think you would have this all together to come to council in June?
We should have a draft together by the end of the week. So I mean, the end of next week. So yes, I mean, if we can, we will. We'll need to have a public hearing 15 days notice before the planning commission, and there'll be a 30 days notice public hearing for second reading of the development agreement. So we've got a lot to do within the next week, but I think it'll be done. A lot just depends on the negotiation, but I think everyone on staff is pretty comfortable with it. Everyone just has sort of one or two details that they really need worked out, mostly with respect to the timing. I've tried to explain to people both internally and externally that when you're looking at a development like this, it's sort of like Magnolia. Even though it's public monies, the number one priority to generate TIF funds is to make sure the development gets off the ground and is solid. And, you know, I do want people's expectations to be that if the city's going to get behind this, we're really going to have to focus on making sure the development gets going. And there will be a lot of public benefits, but I don't expect this to be an immediate, you know, within 2-year impact. Expect it to be an impact, you know, after we get the development off the ground. But I think it'll be a fantastic impact on the city as a whole. Medium and long term.
Okay, so we'll wait to see if you'll be able to have this all done by next council meeting, and we'll have it there. Any questions?
So
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, I just picking up on Chip's last remarks about Magnolia. I did want to remind everybody some of the dynamics of this particular TIF district. It's the stepchild of the Magnolia TIF district.
Yep.
When we created it, you know, and so it's got a shorter time frame than most. And pertinent to the comment just made, and I know Councilmember Appel has made a note of these kind of situations before. The public improvements that would be funded by the TIF revenue, the revenue won't be here for a while. You see the map there. There's nothing there right now. It's just the old landfill. There's no development whatsoever. So the only revenue that's going to support these public infrastructure improvements are the revenue that will come from this very development. So the developer is going to have to put a lot of cash up front just to pay for the public infrastructure improvements in the hopes that the development will end up providing enough income to pay a portion of it back. I can tell you right now, given the timeline that's on the remainder of this TIF, how far out does it go, Jeremy? Do you recall? Like, maybe Chip knows.
On the Morrison Drive TIF, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 2049. It's a 30-year TIF, but the school board has a shorter participation for the portion that had been in Magnolia.
Yeah, so that's the shortfall I was thinking about.
Yes, sir.
The school district is only in for another 15 years or something like that. So I'll be honest with you, he'll never get back all the money it's going to cost for the infrastructure improvements from the TIF revenue, I don't think. And he, you know, he'll be 5 or 10 years into it before he gets any substantial return from it, because the investment needs to occur. So anyway, it's just one of those situations, and it's accentuated because of the fact that it was formed from that other district. I just thought I'd share that with you. And what else did I want to say? I think that's it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions? We'll move on to our director's report. Ms. Johnson?
Sure. Councilmember Mitchell and members of the committee, I'm certainly not going to read this report to you. I submitted this to you for your information. And certainly when we are meeting back in person again, I saw that, Councilmember Mitchell, I will probably dive a little bit more deeply into this report, but oftentimes, and Councilmember Shahid asked me this week, Gianna, are you doing a year in review report? And I says, well, no, but I do have a nice chart that I'm going to share with CD Committee of City Council so that you all have some sense of what's going on, what we're doing, because we oftentimes don't report on everything and you typically don't know about it until I present it at City Council. And so I wanted to get a little bit better about doing that so that you all are aware of what we're doing, what we're helping to facilitate in concert, of course, with our for-profit and our nonprofit partners across the community. And with that, I will mention several weeks ago, Stuart Coleman, who works with Robert Clement, reached out to me about a property on Harriet Street. In fact, it is the entry to what will be the future Magnolia. They want to give to the city for the development of affordable housing an additional 1.1 acres that will be coming to you, or at least we're trying to get that to Real Estate Council and Ways and Means in June, but we're really excited. It's 1.1 acres. There are 2 houses on a portion of that land on Harriet Street right now that initially we thought we would try to relocate. We may end up having to demolish those, but this is free land. So anytime we can get free land when we're thinking about developing affordable housing, that is an amazing plus for us. And I've had some initial massing studies done or just some preliminary kind of look-sees, and we're thinking we can do about 24 to 26 attached townhomes on the site, which we believe would fit nicely in that area to make it commensurate with the type of housing that exists there now, just in an improved sense. So I wanted you all to be aware of that as well as part of my report, such that when you hear it again in Real Estate and Ways and Means, you will know where it came from when it started. So we're going to begin our due diligence on that very soon as well. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, how bad is those houses? I haven't seen it lately. I haven't been back there lately.
They're pretty bad.
Yeah.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
I stopped by because Gianna had told me about this. I stopped by last week. You can see like all the windows have rotted out.
All around
and the doorways. And it's unfortunate. It's not that old a construction, but
that's what I remember.
I don't know if it was the quality of the materials they used or what, but all the windows would need to be replaced, and who knows the condition of the rest of it. But anyway, if we can save them, it'd be great. But I know it would come at some expense.
Okay. Well, okay. Thank you, everybody, for everything. And have anything else to bring before the committee?
Councilwoman Jackson, hand is up. Councilmember Mitchell.
I just wanted to put a bow on Ms. Shaw Johnson's report to us. Thank you for your intentions to be, giving us more fulsome reporting. I personally am happy to mostly operate on the love and trust model. So I do feel like as long as you're working and producing, I do feel like we need to be much more intentional about our Black and women-owned business hiring, and maybe diversify the contractors that we go back to, architects and contractors. I know it's a very easy path when you have people that have performed and you can pick up the phone and they'll be right there. But I do feel like we've got those goals, and so that would be my only thought, Gianna, if we can just sort of try to stretch ourselves to some other levels of using contractors that you don't, have that kind of familiarity with until you get started. But thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor?
One final comment, Mr. Chairman. When I saw this agenda for this evening's meeting, and it's been all great stuff, but I thought that we might be here a good part of this evening. So I'm next time we have a little drag and city council meeting, I may have to call upon you to get us on out. You've done an excellent job.
Thank you, sir. All righty. Anything else to bring before the committee before we proceed to close? All right. Meeting's adjourned. You can go home.